The man smirked as he pointed at the piano. Go on, play something, he said, not expecting much. The little girl quietly walked forward while the crowd chuckled behind her. No one knew she was about to silence them all. Everyone started laughing before she even touched the piano, because the man raised his voice and said loudly, "Let us see what this poor little girl can do," and the crowd behind him leaned forward, waiting for embarrassment, not brilliance. The girl stood still for a moment, her small fingers slightly trembling, not out of fear, but out of something deeper. Something no one there could understand. The hall was filled with expensive perfume, shining lights, and people dressed in wealth, yet in the middle of all that stood a child who looked like she did not belong. Her dress was simple, her shoes old, and her hair tied loosely as if no one had spent time preparing her for a place like this. The man smirked confidently, believing he had already won whatever silent game he had created in his mind. He stepped aside and gestured toward the grand piano, as if inviting a joke to unfold. The crowd whispered among themselves, some feeling pity, others amusement, a few even taking out their phones, ready to record what they thought would be a moment of failure. The girl slowly walked forward, each step soft but steady, her eyes not looking at anyone, not reacting to the laughter, not even glancing at the man who had challenged her. She reached the piano and paused, placing her hand gently on its surface as if greeting an old friend. The laughter behind her grew slightly louder. Someone said, "She will probably press random keys." Another voice added, "This will be over in seconds." But then something shifted in the air, something subtle yet powerful, as if the room itself was holding its breath, waiting for something unknown. The girl closed her eyes for a brief second and then sat down on the bench, adjusting her position with calm precision, her feet barely reaching the pedals, yet she placed them perfectly, as if she had done this 1,000 times before. The man crossed his arms, watching with a grin, expecting to enjoy the moment of her failure. But the moment her fingers touched the keys, everything changed. The first note was soft, almost like a whisper, yet it carried through the entire hall, silencing every voice instantly. The laughter stopped, not gradually but completely, as if it had been cut off by an invisible force. The girl continued playing, her fingers moving slowly at first, creating a melody so delicate that it felt unreal. The sound wrapped around the room, touching every corner, every person, every thought. The crowd looked at each other, confused, unsure of what they were hearing, because this was not what they expected, not even close. The man blinked once, then twice, his smile fading slightly as he tried to understand what was happening. The girl continued her movements, becoming more confident with every passing second. The melody grew stronger, deeper, filled with emotion that no child her age should be able to express. It felt like a story was unfolding through the music, a story of struggle, of silence, of something lost and something found. The people who were recording slowly lowered their phones, forgetting to capture the moment because they were too busy experiencing it. The hall that once echoed with mockery is now filled with something almost sacred. The man shifted his stance, uncrossing his arms, his posture no longer relaxed, his eyes fixed on the girl as if seeing her for the first time. Not as a joke, not as entertainment, but as something he could not explain. The music began to rise, building layers upon layers, each note connecting perfectly with the next, creating a wave of sound that carried emotion so powerful it made some in the audience feel a tightness in their chest. One woman placed her hand over her mouth, her eyes watering without understanding why. An elderly man in the back slowly sat down, his expression turning serious as memories he had long forgotten seemed to return with every note. The girl remained completely focused, her face calm, her breathing steady, as if the world around her no longer existed. Her fingers moved faster now, with precision and grace that spoke of years of practice, years of discipline, hidden behind a simple appearance. The man took a step back without realizing it, his confidence slipping away piece by piece, the reality of the moment crashing into him. He looked around, hoping to find someone who still saw this as a joke, but no one was laughing anymore. No one was whispering, no one was judging. They were all watching, listening, feeling something they could not describe. The music shifted again, becoming more intense, more commanding, as if telling the audience to pay attention to. To feel the truth within it, the girl leaned slightly forward, her fingers dancing across the keys with a speed that seemed impossible for her small hands, yet every movement was controlled. Every note perfect. The sound filled the hall completely, leaving no space for doubt, no space for disbelief. The man felt his throat go dry, his mind struggling to keep up with what his eyes and ears were telling him. This was not luck. This was not random. This was something far beyond anything he had imagined when he had pointed at her moments ago. He remembered the way he had spoken, the way he had laughed, and for the first time a small feeling of unease began to grow inside him. The crowd leaned in closer as if drawn by the music, unable to look away, unable to break free from the experience unfolding before them. Time seemed to slow down, every second stretching longer, every note lingering deeper. The girl suddenly shifted the melody into something softer again, pulling the audience into a quiet, emotional space after the intensity she had just created. It felt like a conversation, like a secret being shared between her and every person in that room. The man swallowed hard, his eyes fixed on her hands, now noticing the confidence, the control, the undeniable skill that could not be denied or dismissed. The final section of her performance began slowly building. Once more, but this time with a sense of purpose, a sense of direction that felt intentional, as if she was leading everyone toward something, toward an ending they could not yet see. The crowd held their breath collectively, no one daring to move, no one wanting to break the moment the music reached its peak. A powerful combination of speed, emotion, and precision that sent a wave of energy through the entire hall. And then, just as suddenly as it had risen, it stopped, the final note hanging in the air like a question waiting to be answered. The silence that followed was heavier than anything before it. The girl kept her hands on the keys for a moment longer, then slowly lifted them, opening her eyes as if returning from a different world. She stood up calmly, turning around to face the crowd, her expression unchanged, as if nothing extraordinary had just happened. The man stared at her, unable to speak, unable to react, his mind racing, trying to catch up with the reality that had just unfolded in front of him. And in that moment, before anyone could say anything, before the applause, before the whispers returned, there was a feeling in the air, a shift, something that suggested this moment was only the beginning of something much bigger, something no one in that room was prepared for. For a few seconds after the final note, no one moved, no one spoke. It was as if the entire hall had forgotten how to breathe. The silence was so deep that even the faint sound of someone shifting their foot felt loud. Then suddenly a single clap echoed from the back, slow, uncertain, almost hesitant, and then another and another, until the entire room erupted into applause, louder than anything that had filled that space before. People stood up without realizing it, their hands moving on their own, their faces filled with shock, admiration, and something close to disbelief. The same people who had laughed moments ago were now cheering with intensity, as if trying to make up for their earlier judgment. The girl stood quietly beside the piano, her posture straight, her face calm. She did not smile, she did not bow, she simply watched, as if she was used to this reaction, as if this was not new to her at all. The man who had challenged her felt his ears ring from the applause, yet inside him there was no excitement, only confusion and a growing discomfort. He forced a small laugh, looking around, hoping to regain control of the moment. He said something about beginner's luck, something about how sometimes even random notes can sound good. But his voice was weak, and no one paid attention to him anymore. He had become invisible in his own scene. A woman dressed elegantly moved closer to the girl, her eyes wide, filled with curiosity and respect. She bent slightly, asking the child what her name was. The girl looked at her for a brief moment, as if deciding whether to answer. Then she softly spoke her name. A simple name, yet the moment it left her lips, something strange happened. A man standing near the front suddenly froze, his expression Changing instantly, he whispered the name to the person next to him, who reacted the same way within seconds. The name began to travel through the crowd. Like a quiet wave, each person repeating it to another, their tones shifting from curiosity to recognition. To shock the man who had mocked her noticed the change. He frowned, stepping towards someone and asking, "What is going on? Why is everyone reacting like this?" The person he asked looked at him as if he had just asked something unbelievable, and said, "You really do not know who she is?" The man shook his head slowly, his heartbeat beginning to rise, a strange tension building around him. The atmosphere in the hall shifted again. The applause faded into murmurs, the excitement turning into something heavier, something more serious. The girl remained still, her eyes scanning the room, not proudly, not nervously, but calmly, as if she was observing rather than participating. Then suddenly, the doors at the far end of the hall opened, and a group of people entered quickly, their presence immediately noticeable. Two security guards moved ahead, clearing a path, while a well-dressed man in a sharp suit followed. His expression focused, his eyes searching the room until they landed on the girl. The moment he saw her, his entire demeanor softened. He walked straight toward her, ignoring everyone else in the hall. The crowd instinctively stepped aside, creating space without being asked. The man who had mocked her felt his chest tighten. As he watched this unfold, he took a small step back, blending into the people around him, no longer wanting attention. The suited man reached the girl and slightly bent down, his voice gentle as he asked if she was all right, if everything was fine. His tone carried respect, not casual concern, but something deeper, something that hinted at her importance. The girl nodded softly, then without speaking, she turned, her head just slightly looking in the direction of the man who had challenged her. Earlier, it was not a dramatic gesture, it was subtle, but it was enough. The suited man followed her gaze, his expression changing instantly from calm to cold. He straightened up slowly, his eyes locking onto the man across the room, and in that moment, the noise in the hall disappeared completely. People stopped whispering, stopped moving, all attention shifted to the silent exchange happening between the two men. One powerful and composed, the other frozen, uncertain. The man who had mocked her felt his throat go dry, his mind racing through everything that had just happened. The laughter, the words, the way he had pointed at her. He tried to speak, to explain, to say something that could undo the last few minutes, but nothing came out. His confidence, which had once filled the room, was now completely gone, replaced by a heavy fear he could not shake. The suited man took a step forward, not aggressive, not rushed, but controlled each step, measured each movement, deliberate, as if he already understood everything that had taken place. Without needing to ask, the girl remained where she was, her presence quiet, yet commanding. The crowd watched in complete silence, no one daring to interrupt, no one wanting to miss what would happen next, because deep down they all felt it. This was no longer just a moment of surprise. This was something much bigger, something that was about to reveal a truth none of them were prepared for. And as the distance between the two men slowly closed, the weight of that truth began to settle over the entire room, like a shadow growing darker with every second. The distance between them closed, and with every step the air in the hall felt heavier, as if the truth itself was moving forward to take its place. The suited man stopped just a few steps away from the one who had laughed earlier, his face calm, but his eyes sharp enough to cut through any excuse before it could even be spoken. The man tried to force a smile again, but it broke halfway, his lips trembling slightly as he looked around, searching for support, yet no one met his eyes the same. People who had laughed with him now stood silent, their expressions distant, almost judgmental, as if they were witnessing something they wanted no part in anymore. The suited man finally spoke, his voice low, steady, and controlled, asking a simple question: was there a problem here? The words were not loud yet. They carried through the entire hall, stronger than any shout. The man swallowed hard, shaking his head quickly, saying no problem at all, just a small misunderstanding. His voice unsteady, betraying the fear he was trying to hide. The suited man did not respond immediately. Instead, he looked back at the girl for a brief moment, and in that glance there was respect, there was protection, and there was something else, something that made it clear she was not just important, she was untouchable. He turned back again, his silence stretching long enough to make the other man feel exposed, uncomfortable, as if every second was forcing him to relive his mistake again and again. Finally, the suited man spoke again, but this time his words were not a question, they were a statement. He said, "You asked her to play without knowing who she is, without knowing what she carries, and without understanding the weight of your own words." The man lowered his gaze, unable to respond, unable to defend himself, because deep down he knew every word was true. The girl slowly stepped forward, then her small footsteps, soft, yet every sound echoing in the silent hall. She came to stand beside the suited man, not hiding, not seeking protection, but simply present her presence alone enough to shift the balance of the entire room. She looked directly at the man who had mocked her, her eyes calm, not angry, not proud, just steady and clear, and in that gaze he felt something far worse than anger. He felt seen, completely seen for what he had shown himself to be. She spoke softly, her voice gentle, yet carrying across the room. "You thought I was nothing because of how I looked. You thought I would fail before I even tried." The words were simple, but they hit harder than anything else that had been said. The man opened his mouth to apologize, but she raised her hand, slightly stopping him. Not out of arrogance, but with quiet control, she continued, saying, "People always think they understand someone in a second, but they never ask, they never wait, they never listen." Her words settled into the crowd, making many lower their eyes as well, because they realized it was not just him, it was all of them who had judged, who had assumed, who had laughed. The girl paused for a moment, then added, "I did not play to prove you wrong. I played because this is who I am." And for the first time since everything began, there was a shift, not in the room, but in the hearts of those watching, because they understood this was not about wealth, not about status, not about power. It was about something deeper, something they had all ignored. The suited man stepped slightly back, allowing her to stand fully in front now, not as a child being defended, but as someone who did not need defending. The man who had mocked her finally spoke, his voice low, filled with regret, saying, "I am sorry, I did not know." And as soon as the words left his mouth, he realized how empty they sounded, how weak, because the truth was he should not have needed to know. The girl looked at him for a moment longer, then gently said, "That is exactly the problem. You should not need to know who someone is to treat them with respect." The silence that followed was different from before. It was not shock, it was realization. It was the quiet understanding of a lesson that had just been learned the hard way. The girl then turned away, walking back toward the piano for a brief second, placing her hand on it again as if closing a chapter. Then she stepped away completely. The suited man and the security moved with her, not surrounding her, but following her as if she was leading. Not them, but the moment itself. The crowd slowly parted, creating a clear path, no one speaking, no one daring to break what had just happened. The man remained where he stood, his head lowered, his thoughts heavy, knowing that this was not just a moment of embarrassment, it was something that would stay with him long after this day ended. As the girl reached the exit, she paused for a brief moment without turning back, and then she walked out, disappearing beyond the doors. The moment she left, the energy in the hall changed again, but this time it did not return to what it was before, because something had been left behind. Something stronger than music, stronger than wealth, stronger than pride. It was a truth that echoed in every mind that day, that greatness does not announce itself. It does not demand attention, it simply reveals itself when the time is right. And for those who judge too quickly, that moment of revelation can become the moment they never forget. The man slowly walked toward the exit as well, not looking at anyone, not speaking, his steps heavier than before, because now he carried something he did not have when he entered that room, a lesson carved into his memory. A reminder that sometimes the quietest person holds the loudest truth, and sometimes a single moment is enough to change the way we see the world forever. And as the doors closed behind him, the story of the day did not end. It began, because every person who witnessed it would carry it forward, telling others about the little girl who said nothing, yet proved everything, and about the moment when judgment turned into silence and silence turned into understanding.